Today on The Way of Ramen, we're attempting a recipe for a legendary Shio Ramen from a legendary ramen chef. This is Sano-san's Shio Ramen recipe, and it's freaking amazing. But there's a catch. So if you're new to ramen, you may not know who Sano-san is. Known as Ramen no Oni or the Ramen Demon, he was a legendary hardass who made even more legendary ramen. My buddy Eric is a huge fan of Sano-san, so I brought him on to talk about him a little bit.
So Sano-san is a famous ramen chef from Japan. He started in like the late 80s and became this huge figure that people would go there, they'd wait in line. And there were super strict rules. If they didn't follow those rules, they'd get kicked out. And he became famous for that. And people would put up with it because his ramen was so amazing. So just when people hear that kind of stuff, they tell other people, and then they just become a bigger figure. That's what happened. I mean, it was just kind of like his commitment to ramen and not really caring what people think, because a lot of times you'll kind of like sacrifice what you believe in for the guest, but he didn't really care at all. If you like, people would try to bring in their kids and their kids would be talking and he'd kick them out. He wouldn't bother being nice to children. He would put all this work into creating this experience for people coming in, that they'd come in and they'd smell the broth, and he didn't want people that smoked coming in. He didn't want people wearing perfume. He wanted this experience to be controlled so that everything he spent all this time doing would be perfect for them. And if anybody messed with it, he would just throw them out. What's wild is that he was always creating better ramen, and this was 30 years ago. And it wasn't until like 10 years ago that people started to catch up with him. It took like 20 years to catch up with Sano. That was the thing that I was talking to a guy I met from Japan, and he was like, it's insane that it's just now that we're better than Sano was 30 years ago.
So now that you know a little bit more about Sano-san, let's try out his recipe that Eric sent me. We're gonna start off with the Shio Tare. I have 50 grams of rishiri konbu that I soaked overnight in a little over 500 mils of water. We're gonna get this pot onto the stove and heat it up slowly to just under boiling. And while the dashi is heating up, we're gonna weigh out 35 grams of katsuobushi. The real recipe uses mejimaguro-bushi, but I couldn't get that. Also, we're going to weigh out 165 grams of salt. And these measurements are based on assuming that you end up with 500 mils of dashi at the end, so you may have to adjust percentage-wise. When the dashi is just under boiling, remove the konbu and add the katsuo or mejimaguro-bushi. Keep this at a low heat for 5 minutes to extract the inosinate, which is an umami enhancer which works synergistically with glutamate in the konbu to bump up the perceived umami. This is Sano-san, man. He knows what he's doing. After 5 minutes, strain out the dashi and be sure to squeeze out all the katsuobushi or the mejimaguro-bushi as well as you can to extract every ounce of the dashi, because honestly this is the most expensive dashi that I've ever made. I ended up with about 450 mils, which is slightly under what I needed, which was 500 mils, so I adjusted most of my measurements from here on, but I'll give you the measurements for 500 mils of final dashi. So we're gonna add the strained dashi back into the pot at medium-low heat. From here on, never let this boil. And we're gonna add in the salt that we weighed out, 100 mils of sake, 30 mils of mirin, 10 mils of vinegar, and I kind of messed up here. I added 30 mils of shoyu, but you're actually supposed to mix everything together, dissolve the salt, then bring the tare down to room temp before adding the shoyu. But this tare still turned out pretty well, but definitely do it Sano-san's way, the way that he wrote in the recipe. Get everything dissolved, cool it down to room temp, then add 30 mils of shoyu. And once the salt is dissolved and the shoyu is added, the Shio Tare is complete. Cool this down and then store it in the fridge for later. Next, we're gonna work in the soup. So we'll start off with the aromatics here. And these are all scaled down measurements, by the way. So half a head of napa cabbage, 3/4 of a carrot, 1/2 to 3/4 of a round onion, clove of garlic, 15 grams of ginger, and also 1 large green onion, which I forgot to film. And as for bones, we're using 1 kilo of chicken backs, 330 grams of pork femur, and 330 grams of chicken feet. We're going to do the pre-boil method here, and I know it's still controversial, but this is directly from Sano-san's recipe. The chicken bones get blanched for just 30 seconds here. The chicken feet are blanched for a similar time. Mine are frozen, so I left them in there for a little longer. You're not really depending upon feet for flavor, so it's not as time sensitive. I got the water back up to boiling and added the pork bones, and this time you're gonna let them go for 3 minutes. Not enough to really break anything down, but just long enough to get some of the blood out of the bones. I'm gonna rinse these out and clean them after I get them out. Also, don't forget to clip off the toenails from the chicken feet. These don't break down and you don't want them to end up in somebody's soup and then they crack a tooth. Also, cut off any ammonia burns from the foot pad. Add the bones into the stock pot in this order. Pork bones at the bottom, then chicken backs, and then chicken feet at the top. Then you're going to add in all of your aromatics. And you're also going to want to add in 65 grams of pork fat, which I forgot to show earlier. Add 4 liters of water and then turn on the heat to medium. With the water added, drop in 16 grams of dried shrimp. And we're going to slowly bring this up to a boil to get the scum to come out. While the soup is heating up, we're going to get our dashi stock ready. This is 26 grams of konbu and 2 dried shiitake mushrooms that I had soaking in a liter of water overnight. We're going to bring this up to just under a boil again and then take out the konbu. And I accidentally removed the shiitake mushrooms at the step, which was unnecessary. Then you're going to add in 33 grams of katsuobushi, preferably the thick cut stuff, but if you're like me, you just got to use what you got. I'm just going to kill the heat here and let this steep like this until I'm ready to add it to the soup. And speaking of the soup, once the scum has come out, you're going to skim it all off as best as you can. And I'm sorry for the bad camera angle here, but it's pretty hard to film and skim at the same time. So sorry about that. You want to be sure to skim off as much of the scum as you can so it doesn't dissolve back into the soup later. And once the soup is pretty clean, you're going to strain out your dashi stock into it. Again, be sure to squeeze out all of the katsuobushi into the soup. You don't want to waste any of that stuff. And then we're just going to let this sit at just under 200 degrees Fahrenheit for 4 hours. From here on out, don't let the soup ever come to a boil. It's a weirdly simple recipe with everything added right at the start, and the cook time is pretty short too, so I don't know, I didn't really know how this was going to turn out. But after 4 hours, the soup looked like this. At this point, I took it off the stove and started to strain it out, and my god, this was probably the most golden soup that I've ever made. Probably the best looking soup that I've ever made. So recently, instead of just straining everything out at one time, I've been doing this method to keep the stock a lot clearer, which is transferring it out ladle by ladle, disturbing the contents at the bottom as little as possible. And I found that this makes a really clear final soup. You basically just keep going like this until you can't scoop out any more soup without digging into the bones or aromatics. And then only at that point do you bring out the strainer and then carefully start to pick up the pieces in there and then straining that over the soup. And I found this makes it really clear at the end, so I think I'm probably going to just keep doing this method until I find something better. At the very end, I tend to leave the last bit of bones in the bottom of the pot and then just ladle the last bit of soup in the strainer into the final soup. And there you have it, Sano-san's legendary Shio Ramen soup. Now, I'm not sure if this is the real soup recipe that he actually used in his shop when he was alive, because I'm pretty sure he didn't want to spill all the secrets, but god, this thing was amazing. It smelled amazing, looked amazing, and it tasted amazing. I was pretty skeptical because of the method, but I tested it out that day. 300 mils of soup with just 10 mils of Shiotare, and it was mind-blowing. It was so dense with umami, but all of the ingredients were still there, and you could taste the chicken and the pork and all the aromatics. Just truly legendary level soup. I was pretty tired by this point, and so I decided to chill down the soup quickly and then get it into the fridge to film the next day. But when I tried the soup the next day, it just did not have the same level of impact as the first time I tasted it straight out of the pot. It was still good, but it felt a little flatter and just not that next level legendary soup that I had tasted just a day earlier. I was pretty disappointed, so I decided to ask Eric what he thought was going on, and this is what he said.
So I don't know. What do you think? I was kind of, the biggest fear that I had was the dashi components died, like the umami components died overnight.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge believer in fresh soup. So a lot, like in the Western world, they say that like soups and sauces need to like rest and age, but I think the best soup is when it's like freshly out of the bones, because I feel like once you strain something out of the bones, it like starts to deteriorate, and the longer it stays warm and there's no bones in the soup, it's going to deteriorate. That's why you want to like chill it down as fast as possible, because these super like new wave guys can't control the temperature of the soup, so they have to strain it and chill it for clarity and all that stuff. And that's why they heat like one small pot up to whatever the order is, because if you keep it warm, the flavor's going to die. But obviously you chilled it quickly, but still I think that like that fresh soup is going to have all that super fresh aroma in it, and fat, I think the fat flattens out as it chills. But
okay, good. That's you're describing exactly what I experienced.
So that's the catch. If you want to try this out, please don't rest it, just eat it that day. Serve it to your friends and family that night. Again, this is against what we consider normal in our ramen community, but you just gotta trust me on this one. But let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below or on Instagram. As always, you can find me there at Way of Ramen. And if you need help with your ramen, you can feel free to join our ramen Discord server, link in the description below. And if you want to get your hands on some rishiri konbu, I have some in my shop, so I'll link that up in the description below. Thank you so much to Eric for being a part of this episode. He's the biggest Sano-san fan that I know, and he's also a super talented chef who's done stints at the French Laundry and Momotaro in Chicago. He's now running an amazing pop-up with his fiancée Elaine called Mochiko Cincy in Cincinnati, Ohio. If you're in the area, please check him out. You won't regret it. Thank you guys all so much for watching. We just passed 100,000 subscribers, which is mind-blowing. I'm so humbled and forever grateful. I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.